What can I say about healing in Final Fantasy? I have been playing as a healer for over 10 years, so there's a lot that I can say, but most of that is probably a bit too much for this video. With Evercold being right around the corner, and there being a lot of new players right now, I wanted to make a guide to try to cure some of the anxiety that comes from playing as a healer. Also, because of Evercold, I'm not going to go into a lot of specific abilities and nuance of how healers can handle every fight, because we don't know at this point which ones we'll be keeping. So this one is for universal principles that probably won't be changing. I'll be doing the same for tanks in the next video. This video is not a comprehensive guide of what abilities to use in every situation. This is about mindset and fundamentals. And at the end I'll throw in some class-specific stuff. The very first thing you need to do, not just on healers, but every class, read your tooltips. You would not believe how frequently you find players who literally don't know what any of their buttons do. This is especially important to learn now because you'll have to do it all over again once Evercold comes out. And if you're not already in the habit of doing it, you really should do this for every job you play. Understand what your buttons do. You need to understand your combos, you need to understand how your abilities affect combat. Read your tooltips. If you're new to healing, I know that it may seem like a good idea to start with a healer that's a higher level, like Sage, Astro, or Scholar if you've already leveled Summoner. But in my opinion, there is a lot you can learn from starting with Conjure and White Mage. And I say this even though I find White Mage to be abysmally boring at higher levels. To be clear, White Mage is a good healer, and it has been for a long time. I was just personally bored by it. I always preferred Scholar. It wasn't until Dawn Trail that I actually learned to like White Mage. Quick side note, if you do decide to start with a higher level healer, and you feel overwhelmed by the amount of buttons you have, an easy way to organize them, and this applies to every class, is to take every button off your hotbar, and then go run Palace of the Dead, and the other deep dungeons. It's a little time consuming, but this will give you your abilities one by one, you can read them as you get them, and decide where's a good place to put them. Sometimes this is a purely logical process, like putting abilities that synergize next to each other, and sometimes it's just vibes. Very often I'll put an ability in one place, and then as I go to use that ability I find myself pressing a different button, so I end up moving it. This method may not be as useful come Evercold, but for the time being it's pretty good. With that, let's start off by saying that your goal as a healer in Final Fantasy, unlike most MMOs, is not to heal the party. In fact, anytime you're not healing, you should be DPSing. Which, I know, that sounds crazy, but it's really not. In most games, as a healer, you want to keep the party as healthy as you possibly can. In Final Fantasy, having a lot of HP is nice, but what you're really here for is to keep them alive. Now, if that means that they're limping through the finish line battered and bruised, well, you didn't die, did ya?
Did you die?
I got shot.
But did you die?
If nobody dies, you did your job. The real trick to this is knowing how much you can get away with. That's not really something that I can teach you. Not everyone heals the same way, and every random party is going to be different. Sometimes you're going to have to throw extra heals at the dancer who can't dodge in mechanics. Sometimes you'll have a tank who just stares down the tank busters. This is something that you'll just have to learn as you get better at healing, and hopefully this video is going to give you the confidence to try. It is okay to fail, as long as you're learning something when you do so. And if you're wondering, why can't I just stand there and heal? Then I can make sure nobody dies. Well, that's just not how we do things around here. For a more serious reason though, think of it this way. When you're not doing damage, the enemies stay alive longer, which means the party has to spend more resources, including their cooldowns and their MP for casters. It'll gradually become more difficult for you the longer things take. As well, raids and trials are balanced around healers dealing damage. If you're only healing, the party is significantly more likely to run up against the bosses in Rage Timer and wipe the party. So it's good to get in the habit of dealing damage while you're still in dungeons. Let's talk about the difference between regen healers and shield healers. As you may know, White Mage and Astro fall into that first category, and Scholar and Sage fall into the second category. With regen healers, you are much more equipped to watch the party get hit and then help them recover from it. You don't have as many tools to prevent damage before it goes out. Astro does have a lot of tools that you put out before the damage happens that then helps the party recover, but Astro is a little more complicated, so we're talking more about the general idea of healing, and more of what White Mage is capable of. As I said, they have less tools to prevent damage before it goes out. However, especially White Mage, they are extremely adept at recovering from damage. A White Mage can easily get the entire party from empty health bars to full within 2 or 3 casts when you use your tools properly. Astro is no less capable, but it takes some setup, smart play, and understanding of your abilities compared to White Mage. Let me also warn you about one thing. Free Cure and Enhanced Benefic are traps. In basically no situation should you ever be trying to spam Benefic or Cure in order to proc Free Cure or the guaranteed crit on Benefic 2. Frankly, at this point, I think they should remove those traits entirely, and I think they are in Evercold. Because all it does is trick new players into thinking that's the way you play. It's not. Likewise, Cure 3 is sort of a trap. Now, Cure 3 is a very strong healing spell, and when used in the right situation, it's your best healing spell. But what Cure 3 is not is an upgrade to Cure 2. Cure 3 is an AoE spell. Cure 2 is a single target spell, and if you read the descriptions like I'm showing you here, Cure 2 has a higher potency than Cure 3. Do not spam Cure 3 if you only need to heal the tank. But we'll see how things change in Evercold. The difference for shield healers is that we are better equipped to preemptively reduce the damage than we are to heal the party up afterwards. Being a good shield healer is being able to prepare for incoming damage, and we have a lot of tools for that. Physic and Normal Diagnosis are less of a trap than Cure and Benefic, but they are comparatively tiny heals relative to your other abilities, so it's best to avoid using them most of the time. So, how do we actually heal? Before we can get to that, we need to talk about GCDs and oGCDs. Your global cooldown is any ability that causes all of your other abilities to roll. Off-global cooldowns are the ones that you can use between those that don't roll your GCD. Generally, instant cast GCD spells can fit 2 oGCD spells between them. And the half cast that we have on our DPS spells can fit 1 oGCD. It seems like they are moving to change this in Evercold, but with the way that the game is currently designed, we are incentivized to use our oGCD spells over our GCD spells, so that we lose minimal uptime in DPS. So at all times you're afforded the freedom to do so, use your oGCDs as your primary healing resource, and supplement them with the GCD healing whenever necessary. Most of the time when you're playing a healer, we will be dealing with dungeons and what we call trash packs. Once you've hit level 50, the most basic healing you need to do for dungeons is apply both your AoE and single target regens to the tank. If you have a good tank, at most you'll need to refresh those when the timer runs out. Sometimes you have a really good tank and DPS and don't even need to use your AoE regen. But if not, be prepared to cast Cure 2 or Benny 2, as well as your oGCDs. If you're in a situation where you need to spam heal, use Lucid Dreaming and keep your MP up. Things are a little different for shield healers. For trash packs, the equivalent of regen is usually being handled by the Fairy or Cardia, which leaves your off globals to cover the rest of the slack. You don't usually need to use shields against trash packs, but if you happen to run into a particularly bad tank, you can spam them. My personal advice, watch their health bars. If they're not immediately breaking your shield, then you can intersperse 1 or 2 physics and diagnoses between your shields to conserve your MP. But, just like the regen healers, be ready to hit Lucid and spam. When it comes to our off globals, you just need to know what they do. Read your tooltips! And spread them out. In emergency, throw lustrates or druricles at the tank. You never know what kind of tank you're going to run into, so you'll do well to be prepared to heal. If you have a good tank, don't be afraid to deal damage, but be ready for the worst. You will experience tanks who don't use a single mitt in trash packs. Hopefully they'll see my tank video. As for bosses, what I said about their specializations applies here. Regen healers can wait until after the damage happens and then respond, and shield healers are better off, at least when you don't know the fight, preemptively putting out shields and mitts. There's a lot that you can get away with when you do know the fights, but while you're learning, take it easy. If you see the boss casting something, just put out a shield and prepare for the damage. Every fight has a lot of different nuances, which is why, with the classes changing in Evercold, I'm not going into a lot of details here, but I do want to give just some rapid fire tips for each class. It's up to you to figure out where these apply. Starting with White Mage. White Mage is a very MP hungry healer. If you're not paying attention, you can easily run out of MP, even if you're using Lucid Dreaming. An easy way to mitigate that is to use Thin Air on your expensive spells such as Cure 3 and Medica 2. You can also use it to res for free. White Mage doesn't have a lot of off globals compared to the other healers, nor does it have very many movement tools, but what it does have is the Afflatus Solace and Afflatus Rapture spells. These are instant cast heals that spend your Lily gauge. You should use these relatively sparingly because you only get a new Lily every 20 seconds, but if you need to move while the party is taking damage or after, You can use these for free movement and to recover quickly because they're instant casts. As well, the Afflatus spells, once you reach a high enough level, also fill up your Blood Lily, so in a sense you aren't wasting global casts on healing. Every 3 times you cast an Afflatus spell, you can cast the very hard-hitting Afflatus Misery. Until Evercold, you can try to save this for the party's 2-minute burst window, but if you're not running high-end content, don't worry about that. Just let it rip and don't waste lilies that could go into building another Blood Lily. For particularly hard-hitting attacks, you can also preempt all of your AoE spells with Planary Indulgence. I think it's how it's pronounced. This adds an extra heal to all of your AoE heals for 10 seconds. Apparently it's also a 10% mit. When did they add that? Holy is a mitigation against trash packs. You'll be able to stun enemies hit by it up to 3 times, though as long as the tank isn't immediately dying, you can keep enemies locked down for a pretty good while. Cure 3 has a short range, so it's best used when the party is relatively close to you, but in niche circumstances, it's a targeted spell, so you can have it originate from a different party member. Lastly, for White Mage, you have one of the best abilities for dealing with multi-hits, which is Liturgy of the Bell. If you know the boss is going to hit the whole party multiple times in quick succession, you can put down Liturgy, which will pulse out an AoE heal every time you get hit with a brief delay between heals. Now for Astro. It's better to use balance on the tank rather than a ranged DPS if you don't have any melee DPS. Likewise, it's better to use Spear on a melee DPS than yourself if you have no ranged DPS. Against bosses, use Earthly Star immediately, and anytime you're in a trash pack. It'll almost always catch the first raid wide, in trials and raids, and then use it off cooldown. Most of the time it'll still catch something, but if not, we have plenty of other tools. While you typically do want to avoid using Benefic 2 where you can, because it's a global cooldown, when you do so, use Sinistry. Honestly, I should take this advice, but I always forget Sinistry exists. You can briefly flash Collective Unconscious in an oGCD window, for the 10% mid and a small regen. Most of the time you shouldn't channel it unless you're in a downtime situation. Lightspeed reduces all cast times by 1 full GCD, which means that it affects your res. This can be very useful when you don't have access to Swiftcast and you need to get people up. Astro has a bunch of timed heals. Manually activating them instead of letting them time out on their own can be very useful, but it doesn't work if someone's too far away. In that situation, you'll just have to wait for the timer to run out on its own. Combust doesn't do any damage on cast. Overusing it to cover for movement is false uptime, which can cost you damage by delaying your next Malefic cast. If you don't have somewhere already planned to use Lightspeed, consider using it for movement. And shout out to my co-healer Ellen for all these Astro tips. As for Scholar, if you've already leveled up Summoner, Scholar and Summoner share the same experience pool. You can go unlock Scholar at the same level that your Summoner is currently at, or vice versa. It's just a little funny holdover from the old days. Now, this is less of a tip and more just what your abilities do, but you can guarantee that you spread a massive shield to the whole party when you combine Protraction, Recitation, Adlo, and Deployment Tactics, in that order. The order is important. Any other healing amp will contribute to an even bigger shield, but those are the ones you can reasonably set up on your own at a given notice. Probably controversial amongst high-end scholars, but don't be ashamed to use Ruin 2 if you need the movement. You should avoid it, it's bad damage, but if you don't have a biotimer running down, you can just use Ruin 2. It's better than casting nothing and not running your GCD. If you're planning to cast Illumination in combination with other heals, always use Illumination first. It's healing amp. Expedient isn't just a sprint buff. You'd be forgiven for forgetting it's a 10% mit, but it is. For Sage. Oh god, all these ability names just sound like medical gibberish. Physis is a healing amp, just like Illumination. If you're going to use it at the same time as other heals, use it first. Also, and this isn't ideal, because it'll cause you to clip your GCD, but you can use it after Eucrasia, before you send out your shield. You should endeavor to use it between your normal GCDs, but if you forget to, you can still catch your shields this way. Numa is designed to be DPS neutral, but it can also be a DPS gain on multiple enemies. It's best used when you can hit multiple targets after a big raid wide. If you're late on applying a shield, you can recover the wasted shield with Pepsis. To be completely honest, I'm not sure what other purpose this ability would be used for, but I'm sure someone has something in mind. Eucrasia turns your standard heals into instant casts. In the right situation, this can be used for movement. You don't have to keep Cardia on a single target. It is more hands-on than Scholar's Fairy, which is just automatic, but you can bounce it around to different party members to heal them up instead of using other abilities or GCD heals. You do need to be aware of what's going to happen next in the fight, so be careful when you do so, and just remember to put it back on the tank. And I think that's about everything. As always, like this video if you found it helpful, share it with others, subscribe for more, and leave a comment if you have your own advice for new healers. You can catch me here on YouTube for my live streams a couple times a week, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye!